What do you think would happen if you made a big mistake when you got into retirement? Would you have time to recover from it? Would you even know you'd made it? I'm going to tell you some huge retirement mistakes I've seen people make and how you can avoid making them. I can guarantee there'll be a few of these you've never even thought about, because not all of them are financial. But there is one financial mistake that's really difficult to avoid because it totally goes against what we're taught to do earlier in our lives. Before we get to that though, imagine you're having your friends over for a dinner party and you want to impress them all with your culinary prowess. You've just remembered that Delia Smith cookbook you bought 10 years ago, and now you just need to find it.
Where are you?
After you've dusted it off and chosen the perfect dish, the first thing you notice is that there are lots of ingredients, which all need to be prepared and cooked in the right order. You need to use different techniques as well to get the best result. You don't want to saute what should be steamed, or boil what should be baked, or just ignore some ingredients altogether, because if you do, it's not going to taste very good. Creating your retirement income is best done by combining different methods together, just like you combine different ingredients together in any good recipe. You might need a stable income base, for example, but just choosing a guaranteed income product alone will probably mean missing out on growth on your money and flexibility when circumstances change. Just choosing high growth stocks and not having any stable income in your portfolio at all could make it too risky and see you running out of money if things go wrong. Everything has a role to play, so don't put all your eggs in one basket. That's the first mistake I see. But let's say you've built your retirement pot up and you know there's enough in there to pay the income you want. What are you waiting for? Are you delaying pushing the button and falling victim to the one more year syndrome? I've seen this many times before. You just want to see out that project, or you just want to wait for that bonus next year. Now, there's nothing wrong with continuing to work, especially if you really enjoy it. 1 year's fine. It's when 1 year becomes 5 years that you have to start asking the question, what have I been putting aside for? So one more year syndrome is the second mistake I see. A lot of the time though, the reason people won't push the button is down to something else. I don't know whether you've ever seen the film About Schmidt with Jack Nicholson. If you haven't, it's about a guy who's basically devoted his whole life to his job, and then he retires. But when he does, he realises there's just a big hole in his life that obviously used to be filled by work. And now he needs to completely rediscover his whole purpose. And I've seen this in my own client situations too. The idea of finishing work terrifies them because it's a big part of their identity. They're worried whether they'll still be valued and whether they'll still be seen as useful. And this is the third big mistake I see. Losing your sense of purpose. It might sound a bit deep, but there has to be a plan for it. Retirement planning isn't just about money. Most people say that what they plan to do when they retire is travel more, which is great, and I always encourage that. But I can also say that when the honeymoon period's over, you'll probably get bored of it, and there's a lot of other time to fill. Still feeling a sense of achievement is important at any stage of life, and that can still come from work of some sort. It may be from teaching or mentoring. It might even be from angel investing if you've got the money to do that. They're all good ways of keeping your mind active and healthy. But another big mistake I see is people not doing enough to keep their bodies fit and healthy too. There's one thing that you need to try and stop as you get older, and pretty much one way of stopping it. That thing is called sarcopenia, which is muscle and strength loss caused by the natural aging process. Now, this isn't a fitness channel and I'm not going to try and make it one. There are plenty of good ones already. But without a plan to prevent this muscle loss, you'll not only become more frail and prone to falls and fractures, it can also lead to heart problems and cardiovascular disease, none of which is fun. The scary thing is that this can start happening from as early as our 30s. Now, the good news is that it's never really too late to do something about it. And the way to do it is through resistance training, which basically means lifting weights. Only doing cardio-based fitness, such as walking, running, swimming, cycling, and that kind of thing, may not be enough on its own. You have to work against resistance and increase that resistance to look after your muscles. But if this 82-year-old granny can do it, then so can you. So the next mistake is one that can potentially be more damaging than anything if you allow it. It starts in your working life. And a little bit of it is probably okay because it can motivate you to go out and achieve more. But in retirement, it's something that will only hold you back. When you retire, it's possible that you might not be able to afford quite as much as you used to when your salary was rolling in. And you might be reluctant to stop working because of that fact. But ultimately, you're fighting a losing battle. If you spend all your time peering over your neighbour's fence, so to speak, wondering why some of their flowers are brighter than yours, you'll forget to take notice of what's in your own garden. From what I've seen, happiness and self-contentment are very closely linked, and comparison is the enemy of self-contentment. The happiest people I know aren't necessarily the richest ones. They're the ones who are able to appreciate what they've got rather than be worried about what they haven't. So I'd best describe that mistake as trying to keep up with the Joneses. It's one to avoid. But the twin sister of that mistake is another one which is just as damaging. A lot of my time as a financial planner, believe it or not, is devoted to showing people they can, and probably should, spend the money they've accrued, or showing them they don't have to be as careful as they are being. It's a natural instinct, of course, to want to protect what you've built up. And when you've been used to always topping your savings up, it can be scary to see them reduce. Having the same confidence to spend in retirement as you did while working is a very important part of financial planning, and one of the major reasons why guys like me actually exist. But not spending enough is another big mistake I see. This is where good cash flow modelling comes in useful. Being able to forecast when you're likely to run out of money, if at all. That's the best way of gaining the confidence you might need to have the retirement you want. There's a fantastic free cash flow tool at honestmath.com. Rather than go into too much detail here, I've created a separate video to run through that site and compare it with a more comprehensive system, which is the one I use with all of my clients, called Voyant. It's only a short video, but it will highlight the main differences and allow you to choose what's best for you. I've linked it in the description below for you. I said at the start that there's one financial mistake people make in retirement, which is the hardest one of all to avoid. It all centres around the psychology of investing. The fact that under extreme circumstances, we often don't act rationally. When you invest in the stock market, you have to be prepared that the value of your investments can fall by 40 to 50%, perhaps even more. History will show us that values do tend to bounce back, but it won't feel like it at the time. So how long do you think you'd be willing to withstand the pain of that loss without taking any action? A year? 2 years? 3 years? I can tell you from experience that you probably overestimate your ability to do so. Having most of your money invested in stocks might be a good idea when you're working because you've generally got time for values to bounce back. In fact, not only are you usually not taking any money out, you're probably paying money in. And that's helpful when values fall because it means you'll get more for your money. But having more of a balance between stocks, bonds and cash can be helpful when you retire. Think of stocks like sunglasses and bonds and cash like umbrellas. Sunglasses are great when the sun's shining, but they're pretty useless in a storm. Umbrellas, though, are good for all conditions. They can stop you getting burnt when it's hot and stop you from getting too wet when the storm clouds burst. You see, bonds and cash might produce lower returns and therefore they're less appealing. Umbrellas aren't as cool as sunglasses. If Steve McQueen was standing here clinging onto a brolly, this picture wouldn't have half the same effect. But what bonds and cash tend to do is apply the brakes when stock markets fall. So holding them wouldn't stop losses completely, but it would probably reduce those losses, which means you're less likely to act irrationally and make mistakes. Bringing them into your portfolio when you retire can feel like you're giving up growth, and it will seem unnatural to do that when you've spent the last however many decades trying to get as much growth as possible. But that's why ignoring them is one of the most common and potentially damaging mistakes I see. So now you know how to avoid the biggest mistakes that can ruin your retirement. But there's a bigger problem you need to fix first, and that is making sure you've got enough to retire with. How can you know what sort of income will be generated from your pot and whether that will be enough? Well, you need to watch this video next, because in it I break down the sort of income you can expect to sustain over the long term from different size retirement pots. I'll see you there.